Welcome. How is everybody doing today? They say that the captain is the soul of a ship, but the executive officer is the engine that keeps it moving. Welcome back to All Things Leadership. I'm your host, Dr. Horacio Maldonado, and today we're discussing one of the most complex roles in leadership, the second chair. Joining me today is Kevin Mutai. He's the current executive officer in the United States Navy. We're going to talk a little bit about the threshold of escalation and how to lead when when you do not have that final say so, and how to manage the friction that comes with that high stakes command. I also have the honor and the privilege to have served under his leadership. He was my strike officer on board the USS Farragut DDG 99. Welcome to the channel, Kevin.
Thanks for having me. It's an honor and a pleasure to be here.
No, I appreciate it. Being the being the executive officer, being the second in command, there comes with challenges, right? Just like anything else, as being the vice president for the CEO and or the associate director. In my previous employment, we had a executive director, then we had a deputy executive director. I felt like he did most of the work, man. I feel like he like 98% of the work it was done by this guy, so it was always good. So I definitely want to spend some time with you today and just talk about, you know, being the executive officer on a Navy ship. I did 24 years, and we always saw the XO as like, okay, we need to convince the XO first because he's going to go talk to the CEO, and vice versa, especially from my perspective in the chief's mess. So I'm just going to talk a little bit about how do you escalate some certain things or some leadership. Um, it's got to go up the chain. So I'm going to ask a couple of questions. So, as the captain's heat shield, I like that word. How do you determine what exact moment a problem is too complex to handle alone and requires you to bring them to the bad news? How do you approach that, Kev?
I guess it just depends on the type of relationship you have with your CEO and also just the type of relationship you have with your subordinates, right? I think transparent communication is important and being able to understand, I guess, what you control and what's within your authorities, I think makes the most sense. So for me, if it's something that obviously I'm going to need buy-in from the CEO, obviously I'm going to need some kind of permission or just even just discussion, then I have it with them. I don't think that I'll ever do anything without that conversation. I think it's just important just to understand how they think because they've been doing this job a lot longer than I have.
Hmm.
And so it's always just good to get that advice and just to get their mind frame on what issues I'm tackling. There are times that I do take on things myself, but usually it's just based on the trust that I've built with my CEO and also the trust that I've built with the people around me to be able to take those on, and then we'll have a conversation after I've either made the decision or I've done something.
Hmm. Yeah, you mentioned a very good thing, Kevin, right now about communicating. Like you both need to be in the same sheet of music, for to execute the mission or to execute that policy or that rule. Um, is there a certain level of autonomy that you normally have as the executive officer for certain things, or you would have to
Yeah,
know?
I would say Yeah, I would say for the most part, most of the day-to-day stuff that happens on the ship, I've been given the autonomy to make sure things run, that the day-to-day routine happens. And if there's some adjustments that needs to be made, then we'll have that conversation either in the morning or at a later time. But as far as making personnel decisions or making certain decisions as far as what we execute. I think I have free reign on that, but I think it just all goes back to the trust and understanding how my boss works.
Yeah. No, and it builds trust. I know you mentioned trust. One of the biggest things when I was in uniform was orders, like, especially when, from my perspective, our weapons officer would be like, hey, what do you think about this? And I like the idea, and I definitely embrace it. And I'm so grateful that I had some great leaders that said, what do you think? At that point, they're kind of saying, well, you've been around the canoe club for way longer than I have, man. what do you think about this idea, whether it's good or bad, but I think they see us as not so much as the subject matter experts, but it's like, okay, more likely we've done it, which most of the times when my leadership and all my commands, I'll give a perfect example. My last command, I was the OIC for a weapon station, and my commander was like, Chief, what do you think about this idea? I think it's crazy, but what do you think? Well, it wasn't just crazy, it was insane, man. Right? But he saw it
Yeah.
from the lens of the overall 360 picture, and which I understand that too. And as it will serve as safety, we have to be, environmental. We got to worry about the state of Virginia not, suing us or something. So I understand that. I think it's a great thing. Let me shift over to because I got some notes here that I want to talk to you a little bit about too. When we talk about authority, how do you build that trust or that authentic authority with a crew without not so much as undermining the captain's perspective or guidance, but how do you build that trust and that the authority with the crew? Because the XO has authority and then the commanding officer has authority. What does Kevin do to build on that authority and for the rest of everybody?
I think you brought up a good point. It's understanding what my specific role is and trying to work within that, and then also just understanding what my CEOs or my bosses' guiding principles are, what their visions are, and then what their left and right limits are. And then from there, it's just like you said, having the discussions with the folks at the different leadership levels and
Mhm.
seeing what they need to be successful, right? I might have some ideas that might not quite be the same as my boss, but how do I get to the end state of making sure that what his vision is or what his goals are actually executed, right? And a lot of times it just goes back to having that conversation and say, hey, what do you think about this? Or if we do this, like, how is this going to impact you? And then making adjustments from there. But as you already stated, a lot of times things that I might say might be construed as orders. But I
Yeah.
always have that conversation like, hey, what do you think about this? Or does this make sense? Or how much time do you need? Or what do we need to do to, to do whatever we need to do? Whether
Mhm.
it's either a routine thing or to come to a decision that my boss will ultimately be happy with.
Mhm. Yeah, definitely. I want to talk briefly about influence, the influence that you bring in as the second in command. What is your vision for influence when it involves the team? Not so much as the crew, but also your your direct reports, the wardroom, those young ensigns, those young JGs, and what influence do you believe or you bring to the table in having the interaction that you have at a daily basis with them?
I think for me, it's the biggest influence I can have is enabling their growth, but also their success, right? Giving them the tools to be able to make those decisions, because ultimately, at some point, they're going to be in the seat. And for me, I always think about making sure that they don't um, see a certain situation or make decisions when they get in the seat. It's all about making sure that they can make those decisions as needed. And then I'm
Mhm.
here to kind of help guide them to get to the right place, right? And then just trying to give them friendly reminders of what we're trying to actually achieve, right? I think one of the things that I learned, especially when we were serving together, is it's like, how do we make sure that we set ourselves up for success, right? Because I knew that you were leaving and then also Donnie was leaving. It's like, okay, what do I need to know to make sure that the division is taken care of, and how do I answer to my boss? Because now it's ultimately going to be me, right? And the things that I do is gonna influence how my sailors are either treated, how they're seen, um, and all that. So I have to make sure that I'm prepared to speak on their behalf, or if I can't, then who do I need to bring with me to make sure that we get the right message across?
Yeah, no, I like that. The whole mentorship perspective. Me and Donnie had this like we talked for like 2 weeks, like almost like during lunch, and I mean we talked a lot about like, hey, what do you think, man? What do you think strikes? Where do you think strike is at right now, right? And having that honest conversation between me and him, like, look, man, this is where I stand, this is where you stand, but together collectively, um, we ensured that you were set up to succeed in your next role. Because we knew it very, very early, um, when we, had interactions when you became our strike officer, we already knew that our job was to ensure that you were set up for success, man, and given all the tools necessary, because Web's to come down and be, you guys are not doing the following. And I'm like, well, hold on, big guy, you're asking me for this, and Donnie's like, we're thinking about this. So I like I go back to what the first discussion that you had, and you said it was having that direct communication with that individual was key, and it was great serving under you, man. Kevin, I had a great time, man. Me and Donnie did. I mean, we pretty much. I don't know if you got some gray hair after we got left, but it was there. So the I'm gonna spend a little bit of time talking about the friction in the triad, and then I'm gonna ask you a question that was asked by one of my viewers because I kind of threw a feeler out. Hey, I was gonna have as a guest an XO of the Navy. He's like, oh man, I want you to ask this question. He's a retired Foobird, so I'll ask at the very end. So
Okay.
when you and the command master chief fundamentally disagree on a personnel issue, how do you resolve the conflict without undermining the chief's standing with the cheese mess itself. How would you approach that, um, and have to talk to the CMC about, hey, I a disagreement on a personal issue. What's your take on that?
I think for me personally, I would have the conversation, and I've had conversations with the TMCs that I've worked with, and say, hey, this is how I'm thinking about this, is and this is I think this is the way we need to go, and we're still at odds. I think that's the conversation I need to have with my boss and say, hey, this is how I view things. This is how they view things. What do you think? Like, um, am I in the right, or is he in the right? Like, or are we just completely looking at things from an ego perspective, right? Because sometimes it might be like I have a small picture
Yeah,
of what's really happening. And so if the CMC probably has a better idea, then um, if we have the conversation, I think sometimes it resolves itself. But if we're at a standstill, then that's when we have, at least I like to bring in my boss and say, hey, like, all right, this is what I'm thinking. This is what he's thinking. Like,
yeah.
am I just out to lunch, or is it or am I just not looking at things the right way? And usually, most of the time, my boss will come up with something that makes sense, or might talk me into being like, okay, maybe you should think about it this way, so that way at least you can get buy-in. Because as you said, the hardest part is undermining the CMC, but also undermining the leaders under you. Because once that happens, then usually people
Yeah.
won't be able to either trust them or look at them the same. So then now all the authority, all the kind of decision making comes to you, and that's not what you want.
Yeah. No, definitely. I'm gonna share with you. Me and Donnie had this agreement, man, and when we first started things off, and our rule was like, we're not gonna let strike or anybody know, man, unless we really need to. So for us, it was more of we got to take care of this in house, of course, with being respectful and being professional and being in uniform. But I said, if we cannot figure out and we got to bring in, for example, yourself into it, like, okay, this was going to happen. We already tried all this. Now we got to be able to escalate it to the next level. You're always going to have friction within leadership. A lot of my clients, a lot of the organizations a lot of the executive coaching that I do, they tell me, well, my VP and my director and blah, blah, blah. And they don't want to listen to me. And it's like, I look at the overall, like you said, I look at the overall picture, but we have to talk about it. We have to discuss about it. Okay. It's not about undermining everybody's title. I think it's like, and then you said it perfectly. It's a matter of like coming together, be like, okay, this is how I see it, this is how you see it, together, cohesively, we're gonna make a decision to move forward. Um, I do talk to a lot of still active duty chiefs, and they're like, the escalation is not as it was, back then. I'm like, I understand times change, generations change, attitudes change, but I think we always ensure that the command master chief was like, hey, what do you think about this, man? Before it leaves the mess, dude. Before I go talk to my strike or my lieutenant or anybody, man, what do you think about this? And I think 98% of the times we figured it out there and be like, oh, by the way, this is what I did the other day. He's still alive, but it's all good. But no, I like how you said it too. Let me ask you this question. I had a I had a retired captain. He retired a couple of years ago, and me and him having a discussion on YouTube about one of my channels. I was doing a discussion on leadership management, and he goes, "I want you to ask the XO this question." I said, "Oh, I'll ask him, man. You know me, I'm gonna put him live." So and I wrote it down. So the question was very simple. I think you've heard it before. I know I've heard it before. I know we've heard it in the Chiefs mess, my whole, 20 plus years, is what is your perspective on training your replacement? And how important is that to you?
I think it's the most important thing I could do, right? Like I tell everybody that we're all replaceable. It could, as you know, in the Navy, it could come quicker than you think. Somebody might get injured or hurt somewhere else, and they need you to fill in. So it's very important that the people below you understand what you do day to day. For instance, I mean, I take time off. I just took time off, and I had one of my department heads fill in for me for 2 weeks, and I've tried to get each one of them an opportunity to sit in the seat so that way they understand what they're walking into. So uh, whether it's them communicating directly with the captain or just communicating directly with our bosses, I always try to encourage them to do that because the only way you can learn is by doing it, right? And
Yeah,
so
exactly.
whether you make a mistake, it's fine. But what you don't want to do is not have seen that, and then once you're out there, something happens, and I didn't train you on that. So
Yeah.
I think that's the biggest role for me, even now, and even in my previous roles as armeds. It's like making sure that
Mhm.
the, the people that work with me understand what they need to do and are fully trained. So giving them as many opportunities as I can to do that. And even if it means them not doing their current job and getting an opportunity to go training elsewhere, I think that's more important than anything.
Yeah, no, definitely. I appreciate it. And you're correct. I like how you mentioned, like, they're gonna be on my seat for a couple of weeks while I'm gone, that so they can understand maybe some of the pressures, maybe how does it feel like, maybe it's like, do we gotta work on the following things, and that's really great. What's um, what's a guiding principle that drives the XO to do a lot of things that he do, especially for yourself? So, what leadership fundamentals or advice would you have for anybody that sees our channel and maybe they're in the military? I got a lot of veterans see my channel, and I see officers too. What is one piece of advice that you can give somebody or about leadership from your perspective and your role?
I would say the biggest thing is just know yourself, know what you could control, and then know your boss and know your people, right? Because at the end of the day, you can't do your job by yourself. And knowing how your people communicate, uh, how they receive news, how they take news, how they make the decisions, that's the most important thing. And then you could just adapt to that. I think a lot of times that even in a position like myself, where I do make orders and I do tell people what to do. If I don't understand what they're going through and how they think and what their background is, then I'm not an effective leader. I'm just a person with a title. So
Yeah.
trying to understand what motivates them is the biggest thing for me. So every day I try to think of, okay, how is this going to be perceived by the E1, or how is this going to be perceived by the Chief Smiths, the wardroom? Like, how are we going to be able to get to where we need to get to? But how do I let them get to the right decision? So, yeah, as long as you know your boss and you know your people, I think you'll be successful at this job, because that's really all it is. It's personality driven, more than anything else.
Personality driven. Kevin, you just hit it right on the spot, man. All right, we especially bringing a lot of the leadership from the military into the private sector, focused on mentorship and making sure your people are taken care of. It's similar whenever I transitioned over to the private sector. Not as smooth as it would seem to be, but at the end of the day, it's about the people that we serve, that we lead, and they need to be able to feel that they can trust us with pretty much whatever they do, especially within your role as the XO. They feel, they're like, okay, he's the XO man. He has our best intentions moving forward, and that's one of the biggest things that you can do. Kevin, I really appreciate you taking the time today and talking to me a little bit about leadership and your role. And I really appreciate everything you do as the XO. And thank you you taught me and Donnie something when we were there. So I'm going to leave it at that. But I really appreciate your time today in being on our channel. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, thanks for the time, and like I said, truly an honor, and truly humbled to be able to get to talk leadership with you as well.
Yeah, no, I got you. Well, I appreciate it. Everybody, thank you very much for joining us today at the All Things Leadership. This is our last discussion, leadership talk for 2025. Kevin, we're gonna wrap it up for this year. We really appreciate your time. Follow us, subscribe to this channel. Any questions you have for Kevin, just put them in the discussion, and I'll pass them up. Everybody else, have a good one, and see you in 2026.